Everything you are looking for in life begins with something most people underestimate. Not a big break, not a perfect opportunity, not someone coming to rescue you. It begins with a single decision made in a quiet moment when no one is clapping, no one is watching, and no one is coming to guide you through it. That is where real change is born. Because life does not transform in public, it transforms in private. In the moments where you are sitting alone with your thoughts and you feel that tension inside you, the tension between who you are right now and who you know you could become. That tension is not a curse. It is a signal. It is life pressing against you, asking you to move. And most people feel it, but they don't respond to it. They sit with it for months, sometimes years. They negotiate with it. They say, I'm not ready yet. They say, I need more time. They say, maybe when things get easier. But the truth is, ease never creates greatness. Comfort never builds strength. And waiting never creates progress. At some point, every person who has ever changed their life had to face a moment where they realized staying the same was more painful than changing. And that is where the decision is born, not from confidence, not from certainty, but from necessity. Think about it. A man can live years in the same cycle, same habits, same struggles, same excuses, until one day he looks around and realizes nothing has moved. Not because he didn't have potential, but because he never made a firm decision to redirect his life. And that realization hits harder than failure ever could. Because failure still gives you a chance to try again, but indecision quietly takes everything without you noticing. A decision is not just a thought. It is a declaration. It is the moment you tell life, I am no longer available for the old version of myself. And the power of that moment is that it does not require permission. You don't need approval. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need anyone to agree. You only need to decide. And the strange thing about decisions is this. They look small on the outside, but they are massive on the inside. When you decide to wake up earlier, you are not just changing your alarm, you are changing your discipline. When you decide to leave behind what is destroying you, you are not just changing your environment, you are changing your identity. And when you decide to try again after failure, you are not just repeating an action, you are rebuilding belief. Every major shift in life begins there. In a single, silent, invisible moment where something inside you finally says enough. And once that line is crossed, everything starts to move. Not instantly in results, but instantly in direction, because direction is always more important than speed. You can be moving fast in the wrong direction for years, or you can take one decision that slowly brings everything into alignment. That is the hidden truth most people miss. Your life right now is not defined by your dreams. It is defined by the decisions you have repeatedly chosen to avoid. And the moment you stop avoiding them, the moment you face them directly, something shifts, not in the world first, but in you. And that inner shift is everything. Because once you decide, you stop being someone who is waiting. You become someone who is moving. And movement changes perception. It changes energy. It changes identity. It changes identity. You start seeing yourself differently, and the world begins responding to that change. But it always starts here. One decision, one moment, one point of no return. And if you are listening closely enough, you already know what that decision is for you. Most people will never admit this truth out loud, but deep down, it's real. They don't stay stuck because life is impossible. They stay stuck because change feels uncomfortable. And when discomfort shows up, they hesitate, they pause, they delay. They tell themselves a story that sounds reasonable in the moment, but slowly becomes a prison over time. I'll start when things calm down. I'll do it when I feel more confident. I just need a better time. But listen carefully. There is never a perfect time. There is only a decision made in imperfect conditions. And that is exactly where most people lose their future, because change does not ask you to feel ready. It asks you to move anyway. Think about how life actually works. Every person you admire for their discipline, their focus, their success, they did not begin with certainty. They began with resistance. The same resistance you feel right now, the same voice that says, stay where you are, it's safer, the same voice that whispers, don't risk it, you might fail. But here is the hidden truth. That voice is not protecting you. It is limiting you. And most people obey it their entire life. They choose comfort over growth, not because they are weak, but because comfort is immediate. It does not demand effort. It does not ask for discipline. It does not challenge identity. But growth always demands something from you first. It demands that you give up the version of yourself that feels easy. That is why change feels like struggle in the beginning, not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are breaking away from something familiar. And familiarity is powerful. Even when it is destroying you, it feels safe. That is the trap. People stay in jobs that drain them, relationships that weaken them, habits that hold them back. Not because they are blind to it, but because the unknown feels heavier than the known pain. So they choose the pain they understand instead of the freedom they don't. But think about that for a moment. Choosing known pain over unknown possibility. That is how lives quietly stay the same for years. And the hardest part is most people don't even realize they are choosing it every single day. It doesn't look like a big decision. It looks like small delays, small excuses, small compromises. But over time, those small moments build an entire life. And that life becomes the result of avoidance, not intention. Because every time you avoid discomfort, you reinforce the idea that discomfort is too powerful for you. And every time you push through it, you weaken that belief. That is why change is not about motivation. It is about repetition. It is about showing yourself again and again that you can do what feels difficult, not once, not occasionally, but consistently. And this is where most people break, not because the challenge is too big, but because they expect change to feel good immediately. They expect clarity on day one. They expect confidence before action. But real confidence is built after movement, not before it. You don't wait for confidence. You earn it by doing what you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it. And the truth is, the people who change their lives are not the ones who never feel fear. They are the ones who stop letting fear make decisions for them. Because fear will always have a voice. It will always have a voice that will always present worst case scenarios. It will always exaggerate risk. But fear does not know your potential. It only knows your past. And if you let your past decide your future, nothing will ever change. So the real question is not whether change is hard. The real question is whether staying the same is harder than becoming who you are meant to be. At some point, every person reaches a moment where they realize the discomfort of discipline is temporary, but the pain of regret can last a lifetime. And that realization changes everything. Because once you see that clearly, you stop avoiding discomfort and start using it. You begin to understand that every difficult step is not punishment. It is proof that you are moving forward. There is a moment in every life when pain stops being something you run from and starts becoming something you finally understand. And most people never reach that moment. They live their entire life trying to escape discomfort, avoid struggle, numb disappointment, and silence the weight in their chest. They treat pain like an enemy, something to get rid of as quickly as possible. But what they don't realize is this: pain is not the enemy. Pain is information. Pain is direction. Pain is a signal telling you that something in your life can no longer stay the same. And when you ignore that signal long enough, life has a way of making it louder. Not because it wants to destroy you, because it wants to wake you up. Think about it. Every person who has ever changed, truly changed, did not do it because life became easy. They changed because something inside them reached a breaking point. A moment where they said, I cannot continue like this. Not out of weakness, but out of clarity. Because pain has two paths. It can break you or it can build you. And the difference is not the pain itself. The difference is what you decide to do with it. Most people let pain collapse their spirit. They let disappointment define them. They let failure become identity. One mistake, and they say, this is just who I am. One setback, and they stop trying. One rejection, and they stop believing. But pain was never meant to define you. It was meant to refine you. There is something powerful that happens when you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to turn me into? That shift alone can change everything. Because now pain is no longer punishment, it becomes instruction. It becomes a teacher that doesn't speak gently, but speaks truthfully. It shows you where you are weak, where you are inconsistent, where you are avoiding responsibility. And if you are willing to listen, it will guide you into strength you didn't know you had. But listening is the hardest part because pain forces honesty, and honesty is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit that maybe you stayed too long in situations that were not right for you. It forces you to admit that maybe your habits have been working against you. It forces you to admit that maybe the life you are living right now is not because of bad luck, but because of repeated choices. And most people resist that level of truth. But the ones who rise accept it. They stop defending the old version of themselves. They stop negotiating with their weaknesses. They stop explaining, they cannot change. And in that moment of acceptance, something powerful happens. Pain loses control over them. Because pain only controls what you resist. The moment you face it directly, it begins to lose its grip. And what replaces it is something stronger, purpose. You see, pain without purpose feels unbearable. But pain attached to purpose becomes fuel. It becomes discipline. It becomes focus. It becomes the reason you get up when you don't feel like it. The reason you try again when you fail. The reason you keep going when nobody is clapping. And suddenly what once broke you begins to build you. Think about the strongest people you know, not the ones who had an easy life, but the ones who went through fire and still stood up. They didn't avoid pain, they transformed it. They didn't deny struggle. They used it because they understood something most people never learn. Suffering is not the end of your story, it is the beginning of your strength. And there will be moments in your life where everything feels heavy, where nothing makes sense, where you question your progress, your decisions, even yourself. But those are the exact moments where your transformation is closest, because pressure is what creates diamonds, not comfort, not ease, pressure. And right now, if you are under pressure, it does not mean you are breaking. It means you are being shaped. So don't rush to escape it. Don't numb it. Don't ignore it. Face it, because what you survive becomes your strength. What you endure becomes your wisdom. What you overcome becomes your confidence. There is a truth most people avoid because it feels too direct, too uncomfortable, too personal, but it is also the truth that can change everything if you finally face it. You already know what to do. Not partially, not vaguely, not someday when things make more sense. Deep down in the quietest pit, art of your mind, you already know exactly what needs to change, what needs to stop, and what needs to begin. The problem is not clarity. The problem is confrontation, because knowing is not the issue, accepting it is. Think about how many times you have had that moment of awareness, that instant where something inside you whispers the truth without hesitation. You know what habit is holding you back. You know what situation is draining you. You know what decision you've been postponing. And in that moment, everything becomes clear. But then something else happens. You start thinking instead of acting. And the moment you shift from awareness to analysis, you begin to delay what you already understood. That is how most people lose momentum. Not because they don't know, but because they keep revisiting what they already know instead of acting on it. And every time you do that, you create distance between you and your own truth. But here is what is even deeper. The mind does not hide the answer from you. It resists the responsibility that comes with it. Because once you accept what you already know, you can no longer pretend, you can no longer delay, you can no longer negotiate with comfort. And that is where most people hesitate, not because they are confused, but because they are afraid of what clarity demands from them. Clarity is not always gentle. Sometimes it is direct. Sometimes it removes excuses. Sometimes it removes excuses. Sometimes it forces you to admit that the life you are living is not aligned with the life you want. And that realization can feel heavy, but it is also liberating, because the moment you accept the truth, you stop wasting energy searching for answers you already have. Think about it. How much of your life is spent overthinking decisions you have already made internally? How much time is lost in repetition of the same thoughts, the same doubts, the same conversations with yourself? That is not confusion. That is avoidance dressed as thinking. And deep down, you know this. You know what needs discipline. You know what needs discipline. You know what needs to end. You know what needs attention. You know what you have been postponing while waiting for a better moment that never arrives. And the longer you delay action, the heavier the decision feels. Not because it changes, but because your mind builds resistance around it. But here is the truth most people don't want to hear. Clarity does not increase over time. It only becomes more uncomfortable when ignored. And at some point, every person reaches a point where life forces the same question again and again until it cannot be avoided anymore. Will you act on what you know, or will you continue living around it? Because there is a difference between a person who is searching for direction and a person who is avoiding responsibility. One is still discovering, the other is delaying, and you are not lacking direction. You are standing at the edge of a decision you already understand. That means your future is not waiting for more information. It is waiting for movement. And movement does not require certainty. It requires honesty. The honesty to admit that you already have enough awareness to take the next step. You don't need everything figured out. You just need to stop pretending you don't know where to begin. Because the first step is rarely about complexity. It is about acknowledgement. It is about saying, I will no longer ignore what I already see clearly. And once you do that, something powerful happens. The confusion fades, the hesitation weakens, the pressure shifts. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop resisting your own understanding. And in that moment, you begin to move differently, more intentionally, more directly, more lined with what you already know is right for you. But it always begins here, with honesty, with acceptance, with the courage to stop searching for answers you already carry. Every delay in your life looks harmless in the moment. It feels small. It feels like you are just buying time, thinking things through, waiting for the right energy, the right mood, the right opportunity. But what most people don't realize is this: delay is never neutral. It always takes something from you. And slowly, quietly, it builds a cost you don't see until it's too late. Because time does not pause for hesitation. Life does not wait for certainty. Life does not wait for certainty. And opportunities don't stay open forever while you decide whether or not you are ready to step forward. What you postpone today becomes heavier tomorrow. Not because the task itself changed, but because your mind adds weight to it every time you avoid it. The longer you delay something, the more intimidating it becomes in your imagination. A simple action turns into a difficult challenge. A small decision turns into a mental battle. And eventually, what could have been done in minutes begins to feel impossible. That is how delay silently reshapes your reality. And the most dangerous part is this: it doesn't feel like destruction while it's happening. It feels like comfort. It feels like relief. It feels like you are avoiding pressure. But in truth, you are accumulating pressure for your future self to carry. Think about how many times you've told yourself, "I'll start tomorrow." And tomorrow comes, but the habit is still there. The change is still undone. The action is still waiting. And now you are not just dealing with the original task. You are dealing with the memory of every time you delayed it. That is the hidden tax of procrastination. It compounds silently. And life, in its own way, always keeps records, not in punishment, Ute in consequence, because everything you avoid does not disappear. It accumulates, it waits, it builds pressure in the background of your mind. And over time, that pressure becomes stress, then guilt, then frustration with yourself. Not because you are incapable, but because you keep delaying what you already know needs attention. And here's the truth most people don't want to face. Delay does not protect your peace. Delay does not protect your peace. It steals it slowly. Peace is not found in avoiding action. Peace is found in completing what you know you need to do, in facing what you have been avoiding, in closing the loops that keep your mind unsettled. Because every unfinished decision, every postponed change, every ignored responsibility takes a piece of your mental space. And the more pieces you lose, the heavier your mind becomes. That is why people feel stuck. Not because life is blocking them, but because their own delays are stacking up inside them. And the worst part is, delay creates an illusion. It convinces you that you are still in control because you are choosing to wait, but in reality, the longer you wait, the less control you actually have. Because now fear grows, doubt grows, resistance grows, and what once required courage now feels like pressure. But here is something powerful you need to understand. Urgency is not your enemy, it is your ally. That inner discomfort you feel when you know something needs to be done, that is not stress trying to harm you, that is awareness trying to move you. And if you ignore it long enough, life will eventually force you into action through consequences instead of choice. But when you act early, when you move at the moment of awareness, everything becomes lighter. Decisions are simpler, progress is faster, and your mind stays clear because nothing is left unfinished behind you. That is the difference between a life of delay and a lie. Of discipline. One builds pressure over time. The other removes pressure in real time. And every person who rises in life understands this truth eventually, not because they are more gifted, but because they stopped negotiating with delay. They stopped saying later to things that required action now. They stopped allowing comfort to override commitment. They stopped turning small responsibilities into long-term burdens, and slowly their life began to open up. Not because everything became easy, but because they stopped making it harder through hesitation. And maybe right now there is something sitting in your life that you have been postponing, something you keep pushing forward, something you already know needs attention. And every time you think about it, you feel that small resistance. That resistance is not a stop sign. It is a reminder A reminder that your future is waiting on a decision you keep delaying. And the longer you wait, the more energy it will take to finally face it. But the moment you act, even imperfectly, even nervously, even without full confidence, the pressure begins to break, because action always dissolves delay. Not thinking, not planning, not waiting. There is a version of you that already exists. Not in fantasy, not in imagination, but in possibility. A version of you that you quietly admire when no one is around. A version that doesn't negotiate with discipline. A version that doesn't break promises to itself. A version that shows up even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one is watching. And deep down, you know exactly what that version looks like because you've seen glimpses of it before. On the days you woke up early and felt focused. On the days you said no to distraction and meant it. On the days you worked when you didn't feel like working. On the days you surprised yourself by being stronger than your excuses. That wasn't random. That was the real you breaking through. But most people don't live from that version consistently. They visit it sometimes, they experience it in short bursts, and then they fall back into old patterns, old habits, old conf, or zones that slowly pull them away from who they could become. And here is the truth that needs to be understood clearly. You do not become that stronger version of yourself by accident. You become it by repetition, by decision, by choosing it again and again until it becomes your identity. Because identity is not what you say you are. It is what you repeatedly do. And if your actions are inconsistent, your identity becomes confused. One part of you wants growth. Another part of you chooses ease. One part of you wants discipline, another part of you chooses comfort. And that internal conflict is what keeps most people stuck. Not lack of ability, lack of alignment. The version of you that you respect is not built in motivation. It is built in moments of resistance. It is built when you don't feel like doing something, but you do it anyway. It is built when you are tired, but you still show up. It is built when nobody is checking on you, but you still hold yourself accountable. Because real discipline is not public, it is private. It is what you do when there is no reward except self-respect. And that is the most powerful reward there is. Think about it. Every time you break a promise to yourself, something inside weakens, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. You lose a small piece of trust in yourself. And every time you keep a promise, even a small one, you rebuild that trust. That is how self-respect is created, not through big achievements alone, but through small, consistent decisions that align with who you want to become. And over time, those small decisions shape your entire identity. Because the truth is, you are always training yourself into someone. Every habit is training. Every excuse is training. Every action is training. The question is not whether you are being shaped. It is what you are being shaped into. And if you are not intentional, life will shape you by default. But when you become intentional, everything changes. You begin to choose actions that reflect your higher self, not your immediate comfort. You begin to think differently about time, about effort, about discipline. You stop asking, do I feel like it? And start asking, is this aligned with who I want to become? That shift changes everything because now your decisions are no longer emotional. They are directional. And the more you act in alignment with that stronger version of yourself, the more natural it becomes. At first it feels forced, then it feels intentional, then eventually it becomes who you are without effort. That is transformation, not becoming someone new, but becoming someone real. But becoming someone real, stripping away the habits, excuses, and patterns that were never truly you in the first place. And here is something most people miss. You don't need a perfect start. You don't need to fix everything at once. You don't need to become the full version overnight. You just need to start acting like the version of yourself you respect in one area, one decision, one habit, one commitment. and then build from there. Because respect for yourself is not built in theory, it is built in action. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you strengthen that identity. Every time you follow through, you reinforce it. Every time you stop yourself from falling back into old patterns, you expand it. Until one day you realize something powerful. You are no longer trying to become that version. You are living as it. And once you reach that point, you don't need motivation the same way anymore. Because identity takes over where motivation used to struggle. You don't question every decision. You don't debate every action. You simply move in alignment with who you are. And that is freedom. So the real work is not becoming someone else. It is removing everything that keeps you from being who you already know you can be. And if you are honest with yourself, you already know what that requires. Not more information, not more waiting, but more alignment, viewer engagement. So right now, ask yourself, are your daily actions building the version of you that you actually respect, or the version you keep trying to escape? Because the life you want begins the moment you start becoming someone you no longer need to question.